Here's why every investor has a logical reason to own Bitcoin, as well as probably anyone, to be honest, as we'll go over numerous examples of governments overstepping their boundaries and, most importantly, making completely terrible decisions, in some ways logical, but in some ways not, and most importantly, they affect you and I, me and you, everyone who's listening to this. So I could even go as far to say that it's not just every investor, it is anyone who has an interest in securing themselves financially, because there is unmitigated pain that comes from these situations. And in the past, there's been no real easy solution to this. However, we'll go over the proposed solution at the very end of this video. You can probably already guess what it's going to lean towards, but I think it'll make a lot of sense once you go through these examples. And I just want to say, making this video was a very sombering experience. It was exciting because I like, going into history, but it was also very sombering because this just happened so many times in first world countries, in recent times as well. So when I was doing the research for this, I tried to put myself in the position of, this is not me studying history. I wanted to feel like I was experiencing it in the moment. So we'll go over a lot of these. Like I said, this is going to be probably a longer video. I have no idea how long it's going to be, but I would also go to say, you don't necessarily need to watch it visually. I will illustrate the points with my voice, with my beautiful angelic voice. And this is perhaps a video that you might want to be sharing with some people. And we have a beautiful picture right here of your traditional Eurocrat. He actually is not really, he's not really the perpetrator of the offenses that we're going to be going over in this video, but I just think it's a hilarious picture because it accurately depicts what I look at or how I kind of visualize the general government official who is going to be making, these decisions that do have massive implications for the people, for you and I. So let's jump into it right now. And I just want to say it at the beginning, there's little value in generating wealth if it can be deleted from your life in an instant due to completely uncontrollable external sources or influences, aka the government or something of that nature. What's the point? What's the point in learning how to trade? What's the point in learning how to invest? What's the point in accumulating wealth if it can just be deleted? It quite literally can. It has happened in the past many times. And so I want to preface this whole presentation by asking you a question. What if I told you that the value of everything you own and or have saved can be devalued, stolen, locked up, or worse, overnight? And more importantly, there's absolutely no person, government, or deity that will save you from this. There is no justice, and there will be no reprieve from the real, unabated, unmitigated pain that is inescapable in such situations. This is real. This is really real. And again, I would implore you as you listen to this to put yourself in the scenario, in the situation, from the perspective of someone who's experiencing this, because it very well can happen. And history is, well, it does indeed repeat. And like I said, this has happened countless times. It really has. Finding stories of assets, store of value, currency, misappropriation by governments is not difficult. In fact, it has happened many times already in our lifetimes. If you were born even in 2000, even if you're a youngin', you've already had several of these happen in your lifetime. Just maybe not in your country, but just because you haven't experienced it yourself does not mean that it won't happen in your lifetime, in your country, directly affecting you. And yes, this does happen in first world nations. In fact, we'll be going over mostly examples from first world nations in the Western world. And this is not to discount the countless other times in recorded history similar events have taken place over the past hundreds of years. If you feel scared, it's because you should be. When shit hits the fan, don't expect anything different than what history has shown us over and over again. No one is going to come to save you. But there is a solution. And like I said, we'll go over it at the end of this video. If you're a part of this channel, you probably already know what we're going to be leaning towards, but I'll go over direct examples of how this can really apply. And this also really helped me sort of understand, my own, relationship with investing. Because for myself, I really didn't even look at investing as something that was, relevant until recent times, until 2020, when the Rona experience happened, and what came off the back of that. What was the major lesson? It was that when shit hits the fan, government can inflate your currency, and you lose 30 to 50% of your purchasing power within a few years. that's more or less happened. And for me, that was a big learning experience, because prior to that, I did not believe in the long-term value of holding Bitcoin as like a real hedge against uncertainty. I just didn't see it from that perspective, but that event absolutely changed me. Anyways, there are several methods of fuckery here as we'll describe it. But we'll go over the 5 big ones. There are bail-ins and capital controls. Europe, very, very good at this, by the way. Currency cancellations and demonetization. There are pension nationalizations and forced transfers. Direct asset restrictions and seizures. The U.S. has done this, by the way. And capital lockups. And yeah, like I just kind of gave away there, we actually will go over one of the examples in the U.S. In the U.S. Crazy idea. But yeah, let's get into it. Starting off with just a first sort of brief overview of mostly first world nations here. And most of these we will actually go into detail on. This is not exhaustive, by the way, but these are the ones that we'll be going over. And you can just have it in a nice, clean and clear table format right here. All right, so let's first go over the first like major method of fuckery, which is bail-ins, basically. And this was popularized in recent times by the EU in 2014, actually. So again, 11 years ago, this video is being recorded in 2025, 11 years ago. Like this is new. Like this happens, and it's happened actually many times in the EU, as we'll go over. So after the 2008 financial crisis, European taxpayers bailed out dozens of banks. That'd be Ireland, Spain, Greece, Cyprus, and actually a few more as well. I believe Italy's on that list as well. Governments realized they couldn't keep socializing private banking losses. So that's what happened in 2008. You kind of had like socialism for businesses, as it was stated. So they came up with a different solution, and the BRRD was designed to make sure that next time after 2008, the losses hit the bank's own investors and depositors instead of taxpayers. So instead of the taxpayers footing the bill, it would now be the people who actually, putting their money in that bank, basically. So you put your money in a bank, you think that it's safe, you think that, oh yeah, it's just staying there and, giving me 0.01% in interest per year. And it's safe there, but at least it's safe, right? So it flipped the playbook from before 2008 is what I'm trying to say. So bailouts were basically using the public's money, and this got replaced by bail-ins, which is just using creditors' monies, including depositors. So again, you put your money in Wells Fargo or Chase, and they run into issues because, well, they probably make some bad decisions, and you get to pay with your own deposits. Amazing. And then, yeah, it got codified. Before taxpayer bailouts, losses hit shareholders, bondholders, and potentially deposits above 100,000 euros. Insured deposits up to 100,000 euros are protected, however. So at least, you got that, I guess. But that doesn't mean that they can't, devalue it by printing more and more euros, which they certainly do. Italy's 2015 mini resolutions wiped out subordinated bonds widely sold to retailers. So the investor takeaway here is in the EU, uninsured deposits sit in the line of fire by design. Like by design. If you have more money than that in your account, you are at risk. In fact, you should probably write that off already. So let's go into some real examples. We're going to start with Cyprus here. I've actually visited Cyprus myself. It is a 100% beautiful country. I fell in love with it, honestly. But after what I read about this, not so in love with it anymore. Anyways, we'll go over what happened and then the result. The result is basically what it means for you and I, for the people who actually experienced that. What happened is just basically the fuckery from the, from the external sources, external from, the general people like you and me, basically due to government, interference. Anyways, what happened was years of risky lending left Cyprus' two biggest banks, which were the Laiki and Bank of Cyprus, probably completely butchering these names, effectively bankrupt. They had a bunch of exposure to Greek bonds at the time, and if you don't recall, Greece had their own issues, and so there's billions in hidden losses after Greece's 2012 default. So these Cypriot banks had invested a lot in Greek bonds, and bonds are supposed to be thought of as like super safe, right? And so they had major losses. And then on March 16th, 2013. Cyprus became the first EU country to impose a bail-in. So they were the first sort of model for this. And the losses applied to depositors instead of taxpayers. Laiki Bank was shut down. So you couldn't even get your money out during this time. Bank of Cyprus was forced to seize 47.5% of deposits over 100,000 euros. All banks closed for nearly 2 weeks. So again, you couldn't even use your fucking bank. Strict withdrawal limits and transfer bans followed. So again, once they actually did open up, you couldn't take out your like a lot of your money. It was very, very limited, in fact. And you certainly could not, transfer to another fucking country. Like, good luck with that. And capital controls marked the first time in history that an EU member froze its own citizens' money. Like, can you imagine that? You go to the fucking store to buy your daily, your daily bread, your daily meat, whatever. Sorry, sir, you can't buy your shit because your bank fucked up. Your bank fucked up without you really having anything to do with it. Anyways, the result, withdrawals for you and I, the people, were limited to 300 euros a day. It's not terrible, to be honest. But international transfers and card use abroad were blocked. So if you were a Cypriot citizen, or you just had access to one of these banks and you were living abroad, couldn't use your money, and you certainly could not transfer that money outside of Cyprus. So good luck with that. Businesses couldn't pay suppliers or employees. Basically, commerce froze, so now their economy really starts to pay the price. So this has a major trickle-down effect, because a bunch of the businesses are using these banks as their custodians for their funds and running their business. That means all of their employees and shit, like, they can't pay them out anymore because you can't pay your fucking employees on $300 a day from one bank account. Crazy. Thousands of depositors lost life savings above the insured 100,000 euro threshold. Small firms collapsed. Unemployment jumped above 17%. 17%. Keep in mind, it's considered bad, like, if you're above 5 or 6% unemployment. 17% is fucking deadly. And confidence in banks vanished overnight. Protests erupted in Nicosia, which is in the north of Cyprus, in the Turkey occupied area. Citizens demanded cash but received promises and paperwork. So it's like, you're trying to get your money out. Sorry, here's a promise. We got an IOU for you. Maybe you can get that in the future. Huh? How about that? Bitcoin searches in Cyprus during this time spiked over 400% within weeks. Again, this is in 2013. Like, this was early days. Mountain Gox was happening soon after this. So it kind of got fucked both ways, to be honest. People were discovering self-custody the hard way. So you'll naturally notice that most of these situations do result in the affected citizens generally leaning towards crypto, Bitcoin. I mean, it's basically Bitcoin, not necessarily crypto. I mean, who the fuck is going to invest in doggy coin, during these times? Like, I lost all my money in the bank, but then I decided to invest in doggy coin and lost even more. No, go invest in Bitcoin at least. So the investor takeaway here is above insurance cash can be treated like junior bank capital in a crisis. Rules changed overnight. Again, these rules changed overnight. Like, they just made it up as they went along. Pensioners, small business owners, and everyday citizens lost decades of savings overnight. So the savers really lost big here. Yes, you were insured up to 100,000 euros, but think about it, man. Like, if you had 500,000 euros, if you had €1 million, all of the rest of that is wiped out. If you were counting on that as being quote unquote safe, it's gone. It's gone, and no reprieve for you. No one gives a fuck. Like, no one cares as well, because you're the evil rich at that point too. You're the evil rich who had above 100,000 euros. So why should we care about you? That's basically the message. And that is how it does feel in the EU. The rich people are basically demonized at this point. They also wonder why, most of the rich people, most of the wealthy people, the people of means have migrated away. It's because they've created this dynamic, basically. Anyways, Greece followed soon after this in 2015. What happened was, by mid-2015, after years of debt negotiations, Greece was on the brink of default on a 1.6 billion IMF payout. Funny that 1.6 billion for a country doesn't seem like a lot, to be honest. The European Central Bank froze emergency liquidity to Greek banks. Without it, the entire system would collapse. On June 29th, 2015, the government declared a bank holiday, meaning that banks closed. All the banks closed for 3 weeks. 3 fucking weeks. You couldn't use your bank for 3 weeks. 3 fucking weeks. Seriously, like, you probably use your bank just about every day, multiple times a day. You can't use it now for 3 weeks. And ATM withdrawals are capped at 60 fucking euros a day. I mean, for a family, that might not be enough. For a single person, living on a budget, yeah, that's probably fine, to be honest. But still, you're capped at 60 euros a day. Foreign transfers and online payments abroad suspended. So again, if you're a Greece citizen living abroad, or just have one of these bank accounts and you're living abroad, yeah, can't use it no more. Can't transfer your money out of the country as well. And a referendum soon followed, and 61% of Greeks voted no to the new bailout terms. Days later, their government accepted even tougher conditions. And capital controls lasted for over 4 years, and they were gradually lifted only by September 2019. So this was a long, ongoing process. And what was the result? For the everyday person, cash became scarce. Many ATMs ran out of money within hours of opening. Businesses couldn't pay suppliers or import goods. So again, you see the next sort of trickle down effect. The businesses get fucked. Commerce starts to freeze. And again, when these businesses get fucked, some sort of silly champagne socialist would be like, oh, well, whatever, they deserved it. They're the evil businessmen. But again, they employ the fucking people. So all the people that they employ are now getting fucked too. It's all related. It's all fucking related. Tourists and locals used IOUs or post-dated receipts to keep shops running. Crazy. Pensioners without debit cards waited outside banks for limited cash handouts. So again, if you're old, and you're relying on your pension, have fun waiting in line, buddy. E-commerce, foreign tuition, and even online app subscriptions stopped working. It's probably the least of their worries, to be honest. But yeah, that sucks too. The investor takeaway here: even with haircuts, liquidity can be ratioed when you need it most. When you need it most, think about, you have an actual medical emergency during these times, and you actually really need access to some liquidity that you have, access to some of your funds that you have. It's probably going to cost more than $60, because I can assure you, even though in a lot of European places, healthcare is free, you still end up paying in some way. It's not great. Mostly paying by the lack of quality, to be honest. Lebanon would be the next example here. Not necessarily a first world nation, but their situation pretty ugly. This started in about 2019, and it's still ongoing. They're still mostly fucked. The country economy relied heavily on remittances and foreign deposits, especially from its diaspora, so from its people, basically. Banks offered high interest rates, up to 15%, to attract dollars. So, the idea here was, oh shit, you can just put your money in the in your bank account in Lebanon, and you'll get a massive return, 15%. I mean, that's better than the fucking stock market return on average at about 6 or 8%. So why the hell wouldn't you do this? Nearly double that. That's an amazing investment decision. But of course, if it's that high, it's probably telling you something else. Anyways, this created a Ponzi-like cycle where new deposits funded old withdrawals and government debt. So basically the idea was we'll jack up the interest rate so that more people will join in on our banks, and those new deposits will help pay out the old people who are trying to withdraw their money as they realize, oh shit, these higher interest rates probably don't mean a good thing. And yeah, that's your classic Ponzi scheme, right? Anyways, by 2019, Lebanon's public debt had reached 150% of GDP. Very high, one of the highest in the world. Foreign inflows dried up, the current account collapsed, and the central bank ran out of hard currency to defend the peg. So they ran out of what was actually valuable to defend that peg and kind of prop up the system. And by October 29th of that year, banks closed. Again, classic scenario here. The banks close. And when they reopened in November, so just about a month later, citizens found out the truth as they tried to access their funds. Dollar withdrawals were restricted or banned entirely. Good luck with that. So even if you were a foreign investor, if you were an American or just anyone else who is using dollars to go and invest and get that 15% high interest rate, well, you couldn't withdraw it. So you got 15%, but you can't actually take it out. So what is it really worth? Not much. Transfers abroad were blocked. So even if you could withdraw it in Lebanon, which you can't, you certainly could not transfer it out of Lebanon. Banks, I'm laughing, but it's really not funny, honestly. Banks imposed unofficial capital controls. So this is always a hallmark of this as well, not by law, but by refusal. If you had $100,000 in the bank or equivalent, you could withdraw it only in pounds. Amazing. And those pounds rapidly lost over 90% of their value. Amazing. So your 15% high interest rate account now turned into a 90% loss. immediately, or nearly immediately. And who paid the price? Middle-class savers were mostly wiped out. I mean, that's the people who are, doing this for the most part. Life savings evaporated overnight as deposits became worthless lollers, local dollars. And businesses collapsed. Again, it has this trickle down effect. So it's not just affecting you and me, it's affecting the businesses that are, employing the everyday person as well. And once they're failing, then what do you think is going to happen to the everyday person? It's just going to get even worse for them. Now they lost their job too. Because the businesses collapsed, they were unable to pay their suppliers or import goods. So it's like the employees of these businesses get fucked. Then the people who need to shop at these businesses, because these businesses are like grocery stores, everyday goods that you need, shit like that. They collapse. They can't be profitable anymore. So they have to close down. So they get fucked. So it's like you can't even your money's gone. Whatever money that you had left over is massively reduced in its purchasing power. And now you probably don't even have the store to buy what you need open anymore. So the investor takeaway here is that confiscation doesn't always look like theft. Sometimes it looks like a foreign exchange rate. That's how they handle that one. We got Russia in 1998. So this was after the Soviet Union collapsed, and where they kind of, I guess, went through some pseudo-capitalism, or I don't know, that probably never really been that. More like just mobsters running this place. But anyways, Russia in 1998, what happened? After years of borrowing through short-term ruble bonds, which were called GKOs, the government faced soaring interest costs revenues. Falling oil prices and capital flight left the central bank with almost no reserves to defend the ruble, which is their national currency. And if you didn't know, for Russia, their oil revenue is like a big portion of their GDP. And so not only was that going down, but the people, the wealthy people in Russia were leaving because, well, now they kind of could because the Soviet Union collapsed, and they're just like, why the fuck am I staying in this depressing ass place? I'm gonna go to the Bahamas or some shit where it's warm, at least. Anyways, on August 17th, 1998, Moscow defaulted on its domestic debt. They defaulted on their domestic debt, not undomestic or just international, but on their fucking domestic debt. Like, who do they own that to? The people, the fucking people, the people who invested in them, the people who invested in their own fucking country. And they announced a 90-day moratorium on foreign payments and devalued the ruble. It's usually the response to these sort of things. The exchange rate collapsed from 6 rubles per USD to 20 rubles per USD. So what are you losing there? I mean, you're losing about, doing some bad mental math right now, but 60% or something like this, 60 to 70% within weeks. Within weeks, you lose 60 to 70% of your purchasing power. Oh my fucking God. Oh, could you imagine? Take your bank account right now, divide that by 60 to 70%. Let's just say 70%. That's your real purchasing power in a few weeks. What are you going to do? You can't really do anything. Inflation spiked above 80%. So now not only did that just happen, but now you're going to get fucked even more in the long term. So whatever you're holding is going down even more. Dozens of banks failed as liquidity vanished, naturally speaking. When banks fail, what happens? Well, the result was foreign currency accounts were frozen. Many banks limited withdrawals to a few hundred rubles per day. And again, a few hundred rubles per day is like fucking $5. Okay, it's not $5, but you know what I mean. It's very, 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 very small. Well, actually, no, we could do that calculation right now. A few hundred euros. So let's say that's 300 rubles per day. So 20 by 300, that's 5, that's 10, 15. So $15. $15. Great. Haha. Amazing. You can have $15 per day, sir. Good luck getting fucking food. Anyways, imported goods vanished and prices for foods, medicine, and electronics tripled overnight. So again, you couldn't import cheap goods anymore. So the prices for your food, medicine, and electronics tripled overnight because now it's only coming from domestic suppliers and probably just costs more there, or at least what they could bring in costs so much that they'd have to jack up the price to make it make sense. Salaries and pensions unpaid for months. So again, just working for free, no problem. It's almost like communism. Real wages collapsed by about 70% or 66% in purchasing power. Savings held in rubles lost over 90% of value within weeks. 90%. Again, you had you had $1,000 in the bank. Now you got about a little under 100, maybe like $90. Long lines formed at ATMs. People rushed to buy dollars, gold, or durable goods before prices changed again, because the prices were fluctuating so fast. I mean, they weren't fluctuating so fast. They were going down so fast. Or sorry, the prices were going up so fast because the purchasing power was going down so fast. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, trust in banks evaporated. Many citizens kept cash under the mattress for years after. And the investor takeaway here is in the 1990s, Russians learned that money in the bank wasn't money. It was hope. It was hope that the bank's just not going to fuck it up, or the country's not going to fuck it up, or some combination of perhaps both, which also happens as well. Bulgaria in 1996. I actually added this one recently due to my conversation with Mr. Pesto of our Discord. Really good guy, really good conversation. And by the way, I'm going to continue to upload more videos like this in the future. So if you're interested in more content like this, I don't know, consider liking and subscribing. Could help out, as well as get, more information like this in your YouTube inboxes. Anyways, the lead up was this. The government kept state-owned banks afloat by lending to bankrupt state industries. So basically, the government was trying to prop up the state-owned banks. I mean, because realistically, they can't really let them fail. So this was kind of coming after communism, I guess, in 1996. I guess it officially ended, but they, you got state-owned fucking banks. Might be an issue. State-owned things in general don't fare too well. Incentives are not aligned, generally speaking. But by the mid-1990s, those banks were sitting on huge piles of non-performing loans. So they took a bunch of loans and they weren't having any real returns for them. Again, it's just when you have these sort of state-owned entities, they just breed incompetence because at the end of the day, you know that you can just print more money to support yourself, because why wouldn't you? You don't want to be the person responsible for the failure, so you might as well just print as much money as possible and leave the issue to the next guy. The issue just grows. Of course, it doesn't go away. Anyways, bank runs erupted nationwide, and if you don't know what a bank run is, it means that people rush to their physical bank location to withdraw all of the physical cash that they can. And naturally, the banks, only have so much. They really don't hold that much actual physical cash on hand to give out. So people, get in line, and probably most of them don't get shit, to be honest. Anyways, between 1995 and 1996, the lev, which is the Bulgarian currency, I believe, lost over 90% of its value. Again, look at your bank account right now. Imagine it's 10% of that or less. That's your real value overnight, more or less. Hyperinflation peaked at 242% per month in February of 1997. Oh my fucking God. Prices doubled every 2 to 3 days. No one can survive that. Almost no one can survive that, at least. Certainly not the overwhelming majority of the population. You and I, everyone here except for the literal oligarchs, which there is probably just a handful. You're fucked. You're so fucked. Savings were obliterated. A typical household lost over 98% of its purchasing power. So again, now it's not just 10% of what you had. It's 2% of what you had or less. Again, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's so absurdly awful that it's what else? How else can you interpret this? The average monthly wage fell to the equivalent of $20 to $30 USD. That is, that's for a month. A month's worth of work. You got the equivalent of $20 to $30. Yeah. Good luck, man. Good luck. What was it like for the average citizen? Food shortages and protests led to mass demonstrations, riots, and ultimately the fall of the socialist government. So yeah, Bulgaria during this time was socialist. They weren't necessarily communist. If I'm repeating my history correctly, Bulgaria was a part of the USSR, and then of course the USSR fell in early 1990s, and then after that, Bulgaria didn't go to capitalism; they went to socialism. Socialism, having all these state and government-run banks this certainly led into this issue. Anyone with deposits in the leva saw their, again, that's a currency, saw their life savings become basically worthless. Fixed income earners, pensioners, and savers suffered the most. So really the people who are trying to be the most responsible and the most diligent long term, they're the ones who got hurt the most. How often have you heard, like, be safe, save your money in a bank account, save 10% of your cash every paycheck. Like, that's the responsible thing to do. But the responsible people are the first people to get fucked in these situations, not because of their own mistakes, but because of the mistakes of their socialist or just general government. Some workers were paid twice daily because wages lost value between morning and evening. That's how fast the inflation was hitting you at these points. People hoarded US dollars, German marks, or gold to survive. Trust in banks vanished for decades. Even today, Bulgarians keep a large share of wealth outside the system. In fact, this is exactly what the Bulgarian who I was speaking about earlier, Mr. Pesto in our Discord, was telling me. He's like, yeah, even today, like, this is still very much in the collective conscious for the people. And yeah, again, the takeaway here is you don't need a bail-in when you have a printing press. And certainly a socialist government like this is going to be massively incentivized to do that. But it can solve the issue for a little bit of time. You can kick the can down the road for a while, but at some point, yeah, the issues just get too big, or you just have some sort of a stimulus or some sort of a catalytic event that makes it unresolvable anymore. Anyways, moving on, we have a case study here in currency cancellation. So now we're shifting away from bail-ins and all of this, and now we're going into currency cancellations. We'll go over India first. This was from 2016. Again, all of these examples have happened probably in the majority of people who have been watching this your lifetime. From my YouTube statistics, I can see that the majority of people on this channel are between the ages of 25 to about 45. So yeah, most people were, everyone was alive during 2016, but even those 1990 examples with the former USSR countries, you definitely were alive during that time. Anyways, November 8th, 2016, 8 p.m., the broadcast as the PM Modi, that is their glorious leader. I don't know how to say his first name, so apologies there. But Mr. Modi, or President Modi, went live on national television and announced that 500 rubies, yes, rubies, and 1,000 rupee notes, which is 86% of all cash in circulation, would cease to be legal tender at midnight. Like, what the fuck? You had 4 fucking hours, and you're like, the cash that you had in your hand, this fucking cash, it's no longer legal tender. You had 4 fucking hours. And the idea here, or how India was, what they were trying to do, because there actually was a reason for this, is they were trying to combat counterfeiting and what they're referring to as black money. Just like fake money in their economy. And so they thought by just making these specific notes, the 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, just not legal anymore, that would solve this issue. By the way, as we'll go over a little bit later, it didn't. It actually got rid of extremely small amount. So the key points here are people had until December 30th, 2016 to deposit or exchange old notes. Only 4,000 rupees per day. Later, 2,000 could be exchanged in cash. Large deposits triggered tax scrutiny. So it's like if you want to deposit a bunch just to hopefully kind of save your ass a little bit, now you're going to have a big fucking, whatever their equivalent of the IRS coming after you. And ATMs were shut for recalibration. New 500 and 2,000 rupee notes were introduced. So overnight, the cash-based economy basically stopped functioning. Like, what the fuck? And I imagine in India during this time about 10 years ago, probably that was most of the economy to begin with. I from what I understand, India is, like, most areas in India are still very much unindustrialized, we'll say. And so, again, just imagine you wake up to find every $20, $50, $100 bill in your wallet suddenly worthless, unless you could get in line at the bank immediately. Further, no black money. So the whole issue that this was trying to solve was basically, it basically didn't work. The black money that was flushed out was estimated to be less than 1%, spot 7%, 0.7% in illicit cash is estimated to have been destroyed from this. It's like, not only was the intention silly, okay, maybe it was, I don't know, but it was just incompetence. The investor takeaway here is cash can become digital confetti by policy decree, plan for liquidity during transitions. Again, this happened incredibly fast. This happened so fucking fast. November 8th, from 8 p.m. to November 9th. That is when this got enacted. And then you had until about a month and a half later to deposit or exchange your old notes. Yeah, have fun with that. All right, we have Japan next. Japan, this is actually not going to be currency cancellations. Jumping around a little bit here. Japan's going to have 2 slides, by the way, just so you know. But this is going to start from the 1990s and going to be ongoing. This is kind of still going on today, by the way. So in the late 1980s, this is the story leading up. In the late 1980s, Japan experienced one of the greatest asset bubbles in history. Real estate and stock markets soared beyond comprehension. By 1989, the Tokyo Stock Exchange Nikkei index hit 39,000. Which, by the way, has not been surpassed even decades after this. You know, we're in 2025 now. At one point, the Imperial Palace grounds were said to be worth more than all of California. That's how crazy these valuations got. But of course, the bubble burst naturally in 1990 to 1991. Stock prices fell 80%, real estate 60 to 70%. Banks were left with mountains of bad loans. The financial system froze and growth collapsed. Rather than allowing a cleansing default cycle, as the U.S. did post-2008, Japan's government chose to slowly paper over the losses with 0% interest rates, QE, so quantitative easing, and yield curve control. No crash, no crisis, just a slow bleed, which, I don't know, is that worse? Is that better? I'm not sure, but imagine that there is literally no growth in the economy for 30, 40 years. It's not going to be fucking good. I mean, like, just basically imagine yourself still stuck 40 years ago in 1985. Like, what? What? That has to be so demoralizing. So the result is this: savings and retirements for the average person. Average savings account yielded 1/1000th of a percent to 0.5%. A generation of retirees who lived frugally found out their savings no longer produced income. So yeah, you bought into the system. You thought, oh shit, I'm going to be fine when I retire. I'm just going to live off this. Yeah, no longer does your saving accounts produce anything, basically. Pension funds unable to earn yield became dependent on government subsidies. So again, it has trickle-down effects here. Now starting to get involved in the government. That's usually not going to be a good thing. Again, government highly incompetent, highly inefficient. It's just not their forte. Like, government is good at governing, not at fucking managing pension funds and, you know, the financial sector. Need privatization there for the most part. Real estate and wages. Property values stagnated for decades. Homes lost resale value as they aged. So imagine, you know, I mean, this is probably a good thing if you're in America. You're probably like, oh shit, I want this. But imagine your home still at the same value as it did of like 30 to 40 years ago. I mean, obviously, it's gone up, you know, many multiples during that time. Probably not even many multiples, but many X's during that time. Sorry, like 10, 20, 30x maybe. Anyways, real wages fell 10% from 1997 to 2020. So your real wages, when you account for inflation and everything else, it actually fell in the past 23 years, despite rising productivity. So people are working more, they're putting in more effort, but they're getting less in real terms from that. Like, that is the most demoralizing thing possible. Again, it wasn't the people's fault. Young workers stopped expecting wage growth. Lifetime employment became fragile. And investment returns. So even if you're an investor, the Nikkei index stayed below its 1989 peak for over 30 years. 10-year government bonds yielded less than 0.25% for most of the 2000s to 2020s. The cost of living rose slowly but steadily, eroding real wealth without drama. And the investor takeaway here is not all confiscation is allowed. Some happens in silence measured in decades. So it's like, again, it happens over such a long period of time. You don't even, you notice it, but you don't even notice it. Like, it's like a frog boiling in water, but slowly to the point where you don't realize that you're about to be fucking murdered, but because it happens over such a, you know, long amount of time, you know, death by a million paper cuts, basically. Some good old water before we get into the next one. All right, now let's talk about pension nationalizations and forced transfers. Ooh, this can be fun. When governments nationalize pensions or enforce forced transfers, they're not seizing cash directly. They're redirecting ownership and control of long-term savings that were once private or semi-private. This is known as the polite confiscation. Oh, I bet you're feeling very polite right now. Let's go through some examples. But first, let's go over what this means. So basically, private retirement accounts, like if you're in the US, these would be your 401k style funds, are absorbed into the state system. Oh, that's great. Yeah, let's put it over to the state. They're really good with this kind of stuff. The assets, so your stocks, bonds, cash, are transferred to government-controlled pension funds. Imagine some random government worker doing, like, first off, okay, no offense if you're working in the government. I'm sure you're a great person, but you probably are not from the financial sector. Thus, you're probably not an expert in this, because if you were, you probably are working for one of the major financial companies. So again, these are probably not the best people to be managing this sort of shit. Citizens lose individual ownership and market exposure. Amazing. Great job. Forced transfers often happen quietly. You're given a choice that honestly really isn't a choice, as you'll see later. Move your money to the state system or lose tax benefits. Sometimes it's framed as reform or stabilization. These are just other words that they use politely, but in practice, it's a one-way ticket into a government-controlled pool of assets. It's like, first you privately owned it, now it's a part of the government and you have to do it through them. Amazing. The goal is usually short-term fiscal relief. So as always, it is well-intentioned to help out in the short term, but naturally negates the long-term view of this because, at the end of it, governments, they're not really that incentivized to think for the long term because most of those people, their terms will be up long before it's a real issue for them. So governments do it when they need instant liquidity to cover budget deficits or debt repayments, generally. By nationalizing pensions, they gain access to a massive pool of capital, often hundreds of billions in long-term investments. For citizens, it's a slow-motion confiscation. You don't lose money immediately, but your future returns shrink, and your savings are now dependent on government solvency. Essentially, your personal nest egg becomes another IOU from the state, which, as always, is going to go fucking great, right? We have a great example here with Argentina from 2008. And of course, if you're watching this in 2025, then you know how this one has ended. You know that what they're trying to do now with Javier Milei, as he goes through austerity measures and everything, which is very painful. Even though probably it's the only thing that they can do at this point that might fix the issue. Anyways, here's what happened. Here is what happened. In 2008, facing budget deficits and the global financial crisis, President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, I'm just going to call her Kirchner, announced the abolition of Argentina's private pension system, which was the AFJP, created in 1994. So it wasn't even that old, survived less than 20 years. Like, fucking great job, guys. Anyways, roughly 30 billion USD in privately managed retirement assets were transferred to the state-run fund ANSES, is what it was called. Citizens no longer owned individual accounts. The government took direct control of the assets. So again, if you're in America, imagine you have your Vanguard account where you're investing in the long term. You've been doing that for the last 20, 30 years. And then one day, the government comes around and says, I think we're going to transfer that to us. How about that? How do you like that? Well, it doesn't matter how you like it or not because we're doing it. Citizens no longer owned individual accounts. Like I said, the government took direct control of the assets. The justification, protecting workers. That's right. We wouldn't want to be unsafe now, would we? Savings from market volatility during the global crash. In reality, the move gave the state immediate fiscal liquidity to service debt and expand social spending. So basically, the government got into issues with their social spending because they were a socialist/communist country. I guess they weren't like full-on communist, but they were socialistic for sure. So they were racking up extreme amounts of debt because that's what socialism is, just paying for shit with money that you don't actually own or that the state doesn't actually own. And so at the end of the day, once they realized, oh shit, we have like a massive, bill here that we need to kind of start to pay. And now the interest payments are basically unattainable for us for, what our actual earnings are as the government, which is just basically your tax revenue. So we need another way of getting money from the people. So let's just take their fucking investments. So in reality, the move gave the state immediate fiscal liquidity to, oh, no, I already read that, sorry, to expand. And then what do? They go and spend more for social services. And again, like when the government does social services, they are not incentivized to be the most efficient with these sort of things. This is what causes the issues. Yes, private companies sometimes fuck up as well, but at least their incentives are aligned. Like you should have to try to do that. Whereas the government doesn't have that same incentive. That is the issue here. That is the core issue. And the result was this: 9.5 million workers instantly lost personal ownership of retirement accounts. Just imagine your 401k gone. It's not yours anymore. It's the state's. Thank you for your contribution, and you get nothing for it. Savings diversified across stocks and bonds were converted into state promises tied to future budgets. Yeah. It's unbelievable. It's truly unbelievable. ANSES, again, that was a state-run fund, use the assets to buy government debt and fund political programs. So they're going to obviously fund themselves and then fund propaganda related to themselves to keep them in power to do more of this shit. Citizens' pensions basically became fiscal tools for them. Transparency vanished, of course. People could no longer track where or how their money was invested, naturally. What do you think happens after that? Real returns collapsed as inflation eroded value. Payouts became dependent on government solvency, which, what do you think the government's doing there in a socialist government? Do you think that they're going to, be a little bit more reasonable and rational with their spending? No, they're not going to do that. They need to get elected again, so they're just going to continue to give out more free money because, well, the people don't know any better, probably. Public trust in institutions deteriorated. Many Argentinians began holding savings in US dollars, gold, or Bitcoin, actually, years later, this was, of course, instead of relying on the state. The investor takeaway here: when the state can't print money fast enough, it prints new definitions of ownership. They didn't call it theft, they called it reform. Let's move on to Hungary. This was from 2010 to 2011. I actually lived in Hungary for a summer once. It's a beautiful country, absolutely, in Budapest. But you can definitely tell that there's a lot of financial pains and issues there. Anyways, what happened in Hungary was they had a two-pillar system: a state pension and a mandatory private pillar where workers contributed. In late 2010, citizens were told to choose: either transfer your private savings to the state or keep them but forfeit future state pension rights. So do you really have a choice here? Like, you don't. The government also halted employer contributions to private accounts. Great. Effectively starving them. So they basically made it illegal. Under pressure, 99% of participants voluntarily, in quotation marks here, very important to acknowledge that, switched to the state plan, transferring about 13 billion of equivalent in US dollar value, which was 10% of their GDP. So basically everyone did that. Yeah, I mean, you kind of had to. So what was the result for you and I if we were living there during this time? 3 million workers lost control of personal retirement accounts overnight. Amazing. Their investments in equities and bonds were sold and absorbed into the state treasury. Also amazing. Like that's for me, that's the part that hurt the most. Like, not that I'm just losing my own money, but it goes directly to the state, who I don't think can manage it properly. I think I'm going to do a better job than them anyways with managing my own personal investments, to be honest. Or at least I'd want it to be that way. Maybe even if I'm not better than them, to be honest. Their investments in equities and bonds were sold and absorbed into the state treasury. The governments used the proceeds to pay down debt and fund the budget, not to secure future pensions. Of course. Again, this was to help out the government, bail them out, not to secure future pensions for the people with, the people's money. Those who resisted, it was about 100,000 people, were excluded from future public benefits. And individual account balances disappeared. Citizens received only a vague credit on state records. It's like... You get the funny money, IOU, Monopoly, fucking Chuck E. Cheese tokens. Great. About as useful as most crypto tokens, to be honest. But yeah, investor take, at least with the crypto tokens, you can hopefully, exchange them for a fraction of a USDT. But the investor takeaway here is the modern state doesn't need to steal your assets. It just needs to redefine your rights. I mean, that's basically it, man. So it's like you technically had the choice. You were technically free to choose. You just had a choice between something that's very bad and something that is unbelievably bad. So it's like you're choosing between two of the lesser evils there, of course. Not much of a choice. Anyways, Poland's next. This is from 2014. Again, I want to call attention to the fact that this is recent, very recent, from 2014 and on. What happened was in the late 1990s, and again, remember, Poland was a part of the USSR, which collapsed in the 1990s, and so they had, any country that was a part of the USSR, I feel bad for, because they naturally had a very difficult time from the 1990s and onward in many cases. Poland's actually pulled through a lot in the recent times, to be honest, but yeah, in the 1990s. Poland created a two-pillar pension system. So there was the ZUS, which was a state pay-as-you-go system, and then the OFE, which was private funds investing workers' payroll contributions in stocks and bonds. So by 2013, the OFE, which was the private funds, managed about 90 billion in US dollar equivalent, so about 20% of GDP. So that's big. With public debt nearing the EU's 60% limit, the governments faced possible sanctions. In February of 2014, the Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, his government transferred all government bonds held by the OFE, so that's the private sector, to the ZUS, which was the state sector, or the government, effectively canceling them. So the values of assets seized were about 37 billion US dollars, so equivalent to about 8% of GDP. Basically overnight, Poland's recorded debt ratio fell from 57% to 49%, purely on paper. It's like it doesn't even matter to begin with. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like the level of incompetence in this. The result, the private funds were banned from buying more government bonds in the future. Great idea. Just don't even allow them to invest. Citizens were told they could choose whether to stay in the private system or move entirely back to the ZUS. Again, that's a state-run system. If they didn't actively opt in to stay private by a given deadline, they were automatically transferred to the state system. Over 85% of citizens didn't respond and thus lost their private accounts by default. As usual, the investor takeaway here is if they can't pay it back, they'll redefine what it means to owe you. Yeah, we'll pay you back. We just owe you in this, this monopoly money over here, not your actual money that you, had before. Like that's whatever. Crazy, just fucking crazy. This one, we're going to go a little bit further back in history to 1976, but this is a first world country, the United Kingdom, the UK. I don't know, maybe some people wouldn't necessarily consider them a first world country anymore, but definitely in 1976, they certainly were. So what happened here is after a sterling crisis and soaring inflation, Britain sought an IMF bailout in 1976. If you're not familiar with the IMF, it's the International Monetary Fund. It's like the World Bank, I guess. To protect the pound, the government tightened exchange controls, as usual, limiting how much currency citizens could take abroad. These restrictions remained until 1979 when Margaret Thatcher removed them. She actually kind of fixed this whole situation. Probably one of the greatest heroes, or among the greatest heroes of the UK. The UK has many great heroes, to be honest. If you study the UK, they are one of the most impressive nations of all time. I love their flag as well. It's like, I think it's one of the coolest looking flags. And it's really a shame what's happened there. But yeah, man, like the UK. And when we talk in terms of the current world, the UK is responsible for so many of the amazing things, so many of the amazing ideas that we have and enjoy today. If you live in America, if you live in the first world and you have all the beautiful things that you do, it's probably in part due to the UK or what they have done throughout history. We owe them a lot. Anyways, to protect the pound, the government tightened exchange controls. Yeah, so I just want to highlight this point because for a lot of these examples, capital controls are a big red flag. So if you see capital controls imposed, meaning you can't transfer as much money outside of your country or your economic zone, it's kind of telling you something. There's some cracks. There's some cracks abound. Anyways, the result for the everyday person, you and I. When traveling abroad, Britons could only exchange 50 pound notes. So that's their currency, the pound. 50 pound notes, barely enough for a few days of expenses. Now, the pound is worth more than the dollar. So I don't know, maybe that's like $70 or $80 equivalent, something like that. You couldn't legally take your savings to another country or open an account overseas. What the fuck? You could not get your money out. Again, capital controls, big red flag here. Foreign holidays became a luxury, and many middle-class families simply stopped traveling abroad. If you wanted to invest overseas, you had to apply to the Bank of England. And most requests were denied, of course. It's like, please, can I invest my money? Like, can I invest my own money, somewhere else? Is that possible? Would that be okay with you? I'd really like to invest my money somewhere else. There might be some actual amazing returns in America or Japan or basically anywhere else than here. Could I do that, please? Please. And they'll say, no, can't do that. Sorry, fuck you. Domestic inflation stayed above 15% for much of the decade. Great. 15%, might I add, we aim and we consider 2% to be good and normal. 15% is, nearly 8x that number. And keep in mind that at 15%, you're going to, your purchasing power is going to get reduced by 50%, basically be half. So your 100-pound note is basically effectively a 50-pound note in terms of purchasing power. I mean, I think that would take certainly less than 5 years. I think 3-ish years. 3 to 4 years, something like that. Anyways, savings in pounds lost huge real value, naturally, but citizens couldn't hedge with foreign assets or gold. So you were stuck. You were basically stuck. You couldn't move your money out. You couldn't buy foreign assets. You couldn't buy gold. Basically, real wages stagnated for a long time, and they had the stagflation trap. And the investor takeaway here is the right to move your money is the first freedom lost when the currency breaks. Really fucking key point. I'm making this video for myself in the future and also for other people to watch out for red flags for when this potentially happens in your own country, because it's not uncommon for these things to happen, as we've gone over many examples already. Now let's go to Turkey in 2018. What happened in Turkey in 2018 was that the economy overheated from years of cheap credit. So they basically had very low interest rates, cost to borrow, and foreign borrowing as well. So corporate debt in dollars exceeded 50% of GDP. Not good. Inflation soared beyond 25%. Again, your purchasing power is going to get halved in 2 years, in 1.5 to 2 years. About 2 years. And the central bank's reserves began evaporating. President Erdogan, I've never actually said his name, Erdogan rejected IMF assistance, calling interest the mother of all evil, and pressured the central bank to avoid rate hikes. What do you think that's going to do? Your inflation is going to get worse. Turkey imposed a series of stealth capital controls. Foreign exchange swaps got limited, dollar conversion restrictions, and restriction of offshore shorting of the lira. So again, this is just a form of currency controls, capital controls, whatever you want to call it. Again, major red flag here. Prices of, so what was the result? Prices of imports like your fuel, your electronics, food doubled or tripled in months. Again, that's your purchasing power in a few months getting halved or worse, 3/4 of it gone. You have a quarter of it left or 30% of it left. Sorry, a third of it. Salaries lagged far behind inflation. Purchasing power collapsed by half in a single year. Again, take your bank account's value right now, divide that by 2. That's what you have for real if you lived there during this time in less than a year. Ordinary people couldn't easily buy or hold dollars. Banks questioned transactions or added delays. Some foreign currency accounts were restricted or converted to lira-based instruments. So it's like you're holding dollars, you thought, and then it just automatically gets converted into lira, which is a shitcoin basically, and losing half of its value in about a year. Despite public wage raises, real living standards fell 20 to 30%. Your real living standard falling about a quarter percent of what it is. A quarter of what it is currently. I mean, Jesus Christ, man, this all happened so fucking fast. Anyways, the investor takeaway here is when you can't move your money, inflation moves it for you. Let's do a very relevant example because we've done it in the US as well. This has actually happened in the US. If you didn't know, during the 1930s and even during most of World War II, the U.S. was fucked with inflation. The financial situation was bad. It was real bad. I mean, obviously the Great Depression, everyone knows this, but it didn't really get that much better for a long time. And during World War II, the U.S. took on a shit ton of debt to finance the war, and I think from what I understand, it almost even lost its own solvency. Anyways, this is 1933. If you're familiar with Bitcoin, you 100% know where I'm going with this one. But what happened was on April 5th of 1933. So this is during the Great Depression, but before World War II. Roosevelt, who was the president at the time, issued Executive Order 6102, making it illegal for Americans to own or hoard gold coins, bullion, or certificates beyond small amounts for jewelry or industry. This is in the U.S. Like, we've done this. We have a precedent for this to happen. And this was done by what many people consider to be among the greatest of U.S. presidents, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And perhaps he was. Perhaps this was actually necessary. I don't know. But still, the result for the everyday citizen is not fucking good. And in the capital, in the one major country in the world where the core fucking agreement of America, the most beautiful thing about America and what it was really founded on is that what you own is yours. The property that you own is your fucking property, and it is untouchable by the government. That is one of the core propositions of America, is that it is a place that you go to actually own things. That is why the people who own things in America do so well in this economy, do so well in this system, but the people who don't do so terribly. It's by design. And I don't think it's a bad thing, honestly. It should promote asset ownership. That should be the goal for everyone. It's just not everyone's taught this. Anyways, citizens were required to surrender all gold to the Federal Reserve. I just imagine everyone like lugging their gold in their backpack to the fucking Federal Reserve. Like, they just walk up there and be like, all right, I'm here to give him my gold, sir. Anyways, they were given a fixed price of $20.67 per ounce. And by the way, if you didn't do this, if you didn't surrender your gold, you would experience a penalty of up to 10 years in prison or a $10,000 fine, which back in these days, $10,000 was probably equivalent to like more than $100,000 in today's currency. Anyways, in 1934, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act, officially devaluing the dollar by raising the gold price to $35 an ounce, marking a 41% loss for everyone forced to turn in gold. So you turned in your gold, and then you're given dollars. Okay, great. Yes, I'd still rather have the gold, but okay, at least I got the dollars. Then they devalue the currency by fucking 41%. So they fuck you the next year after that in 1934. Again, this is in America, I want to add. This effectively transferred enormous wealth from private citizens to the federal government overnight. Like, truly overnight. Again, this was at like the penalty, like you had a choice. Your other choice was to pay a big ass fine or go to jail. I don't know. Maybe they still even confiscated it even in those situations too. I don't know. But so the result for the everyday American was millions of Americans who had saved in gold, the soundest money at the time, lost purchasing power instantly. So again, when people talk about holding gold as a hedge, we have precedent here in what is supposed to be the safest place for private ownership of assets in America. We have precedents that it is not. When push comes to shove, it can be called. And you will face severe consequences for not adhering to that. It is with gold. So small savers, farmers, and middle-class families who trusted the government's gold-backed dollar saw their life savings legally evaporated. Again, 41% loss of purchasing power. That's really bad. Gold holders were forced into paper dollars that immediately lost value once devaluation took effect. Private contracts denominated in gold were voided by law, erasing decades of trust in financial agreements. So think about it. You have a previous, you're running a business, you have an agreement for a supplier that you're going to, denominate something in gold, whatever, or you're going to trade in gold between the two. And then overnight, sorry, we can't do that anymore. Too bad. Banks reopened under Roosevelt's New Deal, but the U.S. citizens was now disconnected from real money, of course. From that day forward, the government, not the people, held the nation's gold. And the investor takeaway here is confiscation can be legal and popular. And I will say, when I was doing the research for this, this scenario when Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102. It was a popular thing in America. It was like thought of a patriotic thing, to give in your gold, and we need it for the nation. And again, that very well may have been the case. I wasn't making the decisions during this time. I don't have full information. I'm sure that the president probably knew more, but maybe there was a better solution than this, because this seems pretty bad. Let's talk about some more direct asset restrictions and seizures. We have Canada. This was only 3 years ago in 2022. Another great relic from the Rona era. All right, what happened was in February 2022, during nationwide trucker protests, the Canadian government invoked the Emergency Act, the first time in its history. So let me actually explain here a little bit more. So in 2022, there's a lot of protests in Canada because truckers were being forced to get the coronavirus vaccine, and many of them didn't want to get it. For personal reasons, for whatever reason, at the time, like, we didn't really have any long-term testing on this, on this vaccine, and people, in my opinion, were rightfully skeptical of it, and wanted to have more information at the very least before, taking this forced injection. And by the way, it's been proven after this in recent times, in 2025 especially, that there have been many issues arising from these vaccines. Not for everyone, many people had no issue with it, but also many people did have issues with it. And so I think that this skepticism was absolutely warranted and very reasonable as well. You have to remember, when the general vaccines that we're accustomed to taking, they have been tested for a very long time, decades and decades and decades. And we also have real results from decades and decades and decades as well. Whereas these coronavirus vaccines, they haven't been tested for that long, certainly not more than a decade. Anyways, so this Emergency Act, gave Ottawa the power to freeze personal and business bank accounts of protest organizers and anyone suspected of financially supporting them. No court orders were required. Banks and payment processors were legally compelled to comply. Again, no court orders were required. There was no due process in this. You didn't have to prove that this person was was in the protest or even supporting the protest. You didn't have to prove that. You didn't go to court and see this overseen. They weren't required. They just had to have suspicion. And who's deciding the suspicion? Well, probably the fucking avatar of the guy on the very first slide of this presentation, someone like that. Anyways, over 280 bank accounts, about 8 million in Canadian dollars were frozen across major financial institutions. Look, realistically, this is a very, very small amount, but it just goes to show that if you have, unideal opinions in what is supposed to be a free and democratic society, which does include the freedom to peacefully protest, you got your account frozen. The government justified the move as protecting public safety. That's right. We have to be very, very safe. We wouldn't want to be unsafe now, would we? And financial stability. Within days, crowdfunding platforms, crypto exchanges, and banks were forced to report and block transactions linked to flagged names. Again, no court orders were required for this. They just decided. The result was some affected individuals were never charged with the crime, yet suddenly lost access to all funds, savings, business capital, even credit cards. So, if you owned a business and you got that frozen, okay, well, now your business is in trouble, maybe even just completely fails. If you, just even for your day-to-day expenses, how long was that frozen for? It was frozen for a few months, I believe, or perhaps even longer. Maybe some of them are still frozen, to be honest. How do you pay for stuff? What if you have a medical emergency and you need to pay for something? That can be a real issue. Payrolls bounced, mortgages failed, and small businesses couldn't operate. People supporting the protest, so just supporters of the protest, not even actually physically at the protest, with small donations, $50 donations equivalent, through GoFundMe or crypto wallets, found their accounts flagged. Fear spread quickly. Ordinary Canadians withdrew deposits and diversified into cash and crypto. Even after the act was invoked a week later, many reported longer-term accounts closed and damaged credit. Your credit score gets damaged. The episode shattered the perception that the Western bank accounts were politically neutral. The investor takeaway here is no inflation, no crisis, just control. This is just straight up fucking control on this one. This is ugly as fuck. That is ugly as fuck. We have Argentina again here. We'll do another one for Argentine because they just completely fuck everything up, huh? Need some more water. This is a long presentation. What happened was by late 2001, Argentina's decade-long dollar peg collapsed after years of fiscal deficits and IMF debt pressure. Citizens began pulling dollars out of bank accounts, triggering a full-scale bank run. On December 1st, 2001, the government announced the Corralito, the little corral, which had three different facets. One, bank withdrawals were limited to $250 per week. Good luck. Transfers abroad, banned. Accounts effectively frozen. Amazing. The government later converted all US dollar deposits into pesos at a fixed, non-market rate, a forced devaluation of savings. The peso then collapsed, naturally, by about 75%. Inflation spiked and the economy fell into chaos. Within weeks, riots erupted, the president resigned, and so the guy who enacted all this stuff, he's like, basically doesn't even need to account for it. Like, it's just like, all right, I'm out. And the nation cycled through 5 presidents in 10 days. The result? Millions of middle-class savers were locked out of their life savings overnight. Ordinary Argentines lined up for hours outside of banks only to withdraw a fraction of their money, $250 per week, by the way. Salaries, pensions, and rent payments were frozen or delayed. Many small businesses went bankrupt again, just destroying the whole fucking system. Families lost 2/3 of purchasing power, 66%, as the peso crashed. The forced pacification of dollar accounts wiped out dollar-denominated wealth, effectively a stealth compensation. Protests turned violent as people demanded access to their own money. I mean, naturally, like, of course, that's what happens when you have real issues. Let's do one from Iceland in 2008. Iceland in 2008. What happened? By 2008, Iceland's 3 major banks, the Glitnir, Landsbanki, and Kaupthing, massively butchering these names, had expanded abroad with total assets equal to 10x Iceland's GDP. To stop total capital flight, Iceland imposed emergency capital controls. Citizens and companies couldn't send money abroad without permission, of course. Again, capital controls. Foreign investors' funds were trapped inside Iceland's offshore krona. Currency exchange and foreign lending frozen for ordinary people. Great. Yes, can't get out. Can't escape currency controls, once again, in effect. The result, savings in foreign currency were stuck inside Iceland's borders. You couldn't move capital freely. Students studying abroad and travelers faced strict limits on how much money they could take out. Businesses importing goods faced bureaucratic approvals for every payment. Like, imagine again that guy on the first slide saying, "Sir, can I maybe buy some goods for my business to run my business? That would be really nice, please." Households with foreign currency mortgages saw debts explode as a krona, that's their currency, fell 50%. Again, your purchasing power just gets chopped in half. Inflation surged to 18%. Consumer prices for imports, fuel, electronics doubled. Many middle-class families lost homes or defaulted on foreign exchange loans. Though the GDP later recovered, personal financial freedom remained restricted for nearly a decade. Again, here is a even deeper list of all of the major countries that have experienced something severe in the past 100 years. So we didn't hit a few of them. Malaysia in 1998, we didn't talk about Portugal. We didn't talk about Italy. We didn't talk about Spain, but these are all EU bail-ins as well. So similar to what happened in Cyprus, kind of in Greece. We didn't talk about, we didn't talk about Switzerland as well, which was actually very recent in 2023. Anyways, like I said, the purpose of this presentation is to give you the patterns to watch for before real issues arise, and then also a solution as well. So 1, banking system under duress, watch for bail-ins, uninsured deposit risk, and fast capital controls. So capital controls, I think, is like the most real red flag that is super obvious. And again, the EU fucking like codified this into law with the BRRD. Like it's law. It's fucking like that's how they want it to work. Foreign exchange crises and sovereign stress. Expect soft default via devaluation plus forced conversions. So that'd be your Lebanon, Argentina situation. Fiscal holes. That would be government taps retirement assets like Argentina, Hungary, Poland. These would all be examples of that. Public order emergencies, so that would be your targeted account freezes like Canada, and then monetary regime shifts, so that'd be gold cash restrictions like in the US and India. Moving on from there, just want to state a few more things. So your money has a capital structure. Below the insurance cap, deposits can be bailed in. Above it, you're effectively a creditor. Equity and bonds can be wiped long before insured deposits, but uninsured cash is in the splash zone always. Confiscation often looks like policy, not police. Haircuts come as conversions, fees, foreign exchange changes, withdrawal caps, or legal reforms rather than men with bags. So this is all like men in suits, not men in police uniforms. Jurisdiction risk does not equal a meme. Even rich democracies can freeze accounts in days. Look no further than Canada just a few years ago. Practical defenses. All right, so here we get into maybe some actual solutions for you and I. Diversify cross-custody types. Mix self-custody securely in reputable custodians. Respect insurance limits. Consider short-duration T-bills, treasuries versus oversized bank balances. So again, if you're in the EU, you're insured up to 100,000 euros. But remember, they can change these overnight. So I don't really even know if this is like a good, real hedge. But if you do need, fiat liquidity and you're in the euro zone, then yeah, up to 100 euros. Don't do any more than that, or whatever their limit is at that time, because they do change it over time naturally. I do think self-custody probably should be prioritized over, reputable custodians, but mixing them is obviously going to be a little bit more diversified, or at least diversifying your risk. Diversify across jurisdiction and rails. So multiple banks, multiple countries if possible, and multiple payment networks. That will reduce single switch risk. But again, in a lot of these situations, you will notice that, many countries will cancel, foreign exchange conversions and things like this. So again, this does have some issues with it. Of course, the next point of defense is mixing assets with purpose. So some gold, again, not financial advice, some Bitcoin, not financial advice, but I do think self-custody with discipline probably ideal here. Some highly liquid traditional assets perhaps as well. But again, the only one of these that actually does have real defense in that could actually have been applied to all of the prior situations that we went over would be Bitcoin. We've seen even gold be, misappropriated, or not necessarily misappropriated, but just confiscated. And highly liquid traditional assets. I mean, what if the fucking government just declares that a part of their fucking, balance sheet? Like it's gone as well. So Bitcoin really does seem to be the best acknowledgement to deal with these situations. Paper trail and compliance. If you ever must move fast, like tightening controls, pre-cleared KYC, and task compliance avoids getting flagged. And watch for early warning lights. Like sudden ELA cuts like the ECB did, capital flight data, emergency decrees, IMF program talk, deposit guarantee chatter, usual bank holidays, these sorts of things are all things to keep an eye out for. But now I'll just speak directly here to the solution for this. And I'll go way back to like the first slide here. So the biggest logical reason to own Bitcoin is because it deals with all of these particular issues. Bitcoin is something that you can self-custody, that you do not need an intermediary for, although you can use it, and probably in many cases it is safe. But at the very least, it could have dealt with all these situations because it is outside the system, meaning that you cannot be compelled, or it cannot be forcibly taken from you without your own consent. Now, of course, you could argue that the situation that happened in 1933 with gold in the U.S. Could apply to Bitcoin. But even then, with gold, they can make it very, very difficult to use. They can make it very, very difficult to custody yourself. I mean, naturally, most people are going to be keeping that in a bank anyways. So, those sort of natural defenses were not applicable to gold. But with Bitcoin, you can. I mean, it can just be numbers in your brain. It can also be a hardware wallet. It can be all sorts of different things. But you can take it with you freely. It doesn't weigh anything. If you need to go to a different jurisdiction, if you need to escape your country, you can do that very easily. It's, in the most case, it comes in like a fucking thumb drive. So it fits quite simply in your pocket, no problem there. And again, it's not going to be at the mercy of these sort of capital controls, not going to be at the mercy of these currency devaluations, or at least in some way it's not. It is related to currency at the end of the day, but generally speaking, it's outside of the system in that way. So it is our current best defense against government incompetence, basically, or just things that you don't agree with. And most importantly, it gives you the optionality to leave and to go somewhere where things are more friendly towards your situation. Go where you're treated best, as the old saying goes. And Bitcoin gives you that possibility to do. And you don't necessarily have to worry as much as just the government directly taking your fucking 401k and putting it in their own balance sheet. That's one of the craziest examples of all this to me, is that you have your Vanguard account, you're investing there, and then the government just says, no, that's ours. We'll take it overnight. In that case, yeah, Bitcoin is a great defense against that. They can't just do that unless you hold your Bitcoin in a brokerage account like that. But yeah, anyways, I'll get off the topic here. This video has gone on for a tremendous amount of time. I do apologize about that, but I really did enjoy making this video. If you want more videos like this, definitely consider liking and subscribing to this channel. I'll continue to do more in the future, and I'm also open to other suggestions for content similar to this, because I do want to start to bring awareness to these sorts of things, because it's something that I've really started to study and learn more about in the past 5 years, and I feel that it is really, 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 really important for the everyday average person, because the amount of pain that people have experienced from these situations, as you can likely use your imagination to kind of experience yourself as going through all these slides, that's just I mean, it's unconscionable. It's so fucking intense that I feel giving out sort of information that can make people privy to this is important. And so it makes me feel motivated to help out in that regard, because I was completely humbled when I went through all of these situations and realized that this is not uncommon, and it not only has it happened in my own country, it's happened in many other countries as well, and it's par for the course when shit hits the fan. So we'll end things right there. As always, I want to wish you the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully next time.